There needs to be someone who is sort of the keeper and reiterator of the vision. Because there's just a ton of work to do. And a lot of times, you know, when you have to walk 1,000 miles and you take the first step, it looks like a long ways. And it really helps if there's someone there saying, well, we're one step closer. You know, the goal definitely exists. It's not just a mirage out there. So in 1,001 little and sometimes larger ways, the vision needs to be reiterated. I do that a lot. Boy, I've forgotten how much work it actually is to start a company. It's a lot of work. And you've got to do everything. You've got to come up with a name. You've got to come up with a logo. I mean, in addition to designing the product, you've got to figure out what to design. You've got to figure out how you're going to get it to the marketplace. You've got to do a part number system. You've got to go get bank accounts. You've got to set up charts, general ledgers, get a management information system, get a little kitchen set up, get a coffee maker, all this stuff. Well, my first saying is that the honeymoon is over. All of those wonderful things that we got for just being are now sort of just old news. We are like every other startup. We've been a company now for 6 months. And yes, you could say that, well, we had a lawsuit for 4 of those months and we had this and that. But the bottom line is the world doesn't really care. What the world cares about is what we produce. We've been a startup for 6 months. We've been spending money like we've been a startup for 6 months. And in some areas, we've really produced a lot. We've got a lot to show for 6 months in some areas. In other areas, we don't have a lot to show for 6 months. So I hope that throughout this retreat, we tend to make sure that our feet are on the ground and we realize that we're going to be judged like every other startup from here on out, and that is by what our product is and how timely we bring it to market. And getting a consensus on a common vision. We wanted people that were insanely great at what they did, but we're not necessarily those seasoned professionals, but who had at the tips of their fingers and in their passion the latest understanding of where technology was and what we could do with that technology, and who wanted to bring that to lots of people. So the neatest thing that happens is when you get a core group of 10 great people, it becomes self-policing as to who they let into that group. So I consider the most important job of someone like myself is recruiting.
One of the things I've always found is that you've got to start with the customer experience and work backwards to the technology. You can't start with the technology and try to figure out where you're going to try to sell it. And I've made this mistake probably more than anybody else in this room. And I've got the scar tissue to prove it. And I know that it's the case. And as we have tried to come up with a strategy and a vision for Apple, it started with what incredible benefits can we give to the customer? Where can we take the customer? Not starting with, let's sit down with the engineers and figure out what awesome technology we have, and then how are we going to market that? And I think that's the right path to take.
You've got to find what you love, and that is as true for work as it is for your lovers. Your work is going to fill a large part of your life, and the only way to be truly satisfied is to do what you believe is great work. And the only way to do great work is to love what you do. If you haven't found it yet, keep looking, and don't settle. As with all matters of the heart, you'll know when you find it. And like any great relationship, it just gets better and better as the years roll on. So keep looking. Don't settle.
Did you ever want to give up? Did you ever think of giving up?
Oh, there were moments where it was pretty tough. There have been moments, but no, I don't think so. I don't think so. The first year or two was the hardest.
And there was no personal computer in 1975. It's
Right.
it's very hard to believe.
Well, that's why we made one.
Yeah.
We made one because we wanted one, and there wasn't one, so we had to make one.
Did you know that when you made the personal computer, though, that this will become a major industry? I mean, did you know like this?
No. It took about a year before we started to sense it. I had a partner named Steve Wozniak,
Right.
who's a brilliant guy, and he did most of the engineering on the original Apple I and the Apple II. And after about a year, we showed it to we just made it for ourselves, and we showed it to our friends, and they all wanted one. And so we were busy making these computers by hand for our friends, and it was taking all of our life, all of our spare time. And so we decided we better manufacture 100 of these to get, so that we can not have to spend the rest of our lives making them for our friends. And that's how we got into this. We didn't think about starting a company. We were just doing it for ourselves, and then our friends, and then the circle got bigger and bigger and bigger. Now there's 25 million people.
So you were having fun.
Oh yeah, we've always had fun doing this.
So many young people are aspiring to become, startup venture, venture companies and emulate something like Apple for themselves.
And sometimes people come to me and say, I want to start a company. And I say, why? They say, oh, I want to make lots of money. I say, forget it. That's not a good enough reason. Most people that have started companies because they want to make lots of money, I haven't seen very many of those succeed. The ones that succeed are people that come, sometimes they don't even want to start a company, they just have an idea that they want to get out, expressed out into the world. And oftentimes they have to start a company because nobody else will listen to them.
It's a company of 10,000 people. How do you permeate the message throughout all the employees? What do you say to them?
Well, you permeate it by example, ultimately. And in other words, when something's not quite good enough, do you stop and make it better, or do you just ship it? And everybody watches to see how the senior management makes those decisions. And what we've tried to do is stop and make it great before we ship it. When we have problems, stop and fix them. And by example, you can say anything you want, but everybody watches very carefully when you're in a difficult situation, what decisions you make, what values you have.
They would like to know how you do it, and it's probably it's probably not easy to do.
Yeah, we try to hire really smart people, but we have a very simple organization, and we try to focus and do very few things well. And focusing's hard because focusing doesn't mean saying yes, it means saying no. So we decide not to do a lot of things so we can focus on a few handfuls of things and do them well. And I think everybody working at a company wants to do something great. They want to be excited about what they're working on, and they want to be recognized for it if they do a really great job. So we just try to allow people to do the best work of their lives at Apple and get it out to 25 million customers that we have. And that's very exciting. And when you're working on something, and if this works out, up to 25 million people are going to use this. It's very motivating. And it's not just 25 million of our customers, but other companies tend to follow us. It takes them a few years, but other companies tend to copy what we do if it works. And so we can influence the whole industry.
How do you see yourself 10 years from now?
My headlights are not that good. I don't know. I don't really think about it. I think about a year, 2, 3 down the road. We have some projects at Apple that are sort of maybe 4 years down the road, 5 years, probably like 3 or 4 at the most, because things change too much. You can be going down a path, you say, well, in 5 years I want to be here, but then something new happens, and you just say, forget that, I want to be over there. So most of this 5-year planning that I've seen in my life, some of it's essential, but most of it changes too quickly. So we tend to look 3, 4 years. It's about as far ahead as we can see.
So you can kick yourself in the butt, but I guess now's the time to change. And one of the things that I don't see is, I don't see it myself, I don't see it in enough of the rest of us, is I don't see that startup hustle. In other words, if we zoom out at the big picture, it would be a shame to have lost the war because we won a few battles. And I sort of feel like I and some of the rest of us are concentrating too much on the smaller battles.
We have to
and we're not keeping the war in perspective. And the war is called survival. The war is called not run out of money until we get our product on the market. Some insights and some fundamentally different experiences which I thought might be very beneficial to their lives because of this germ of an idea a few years ago. And that's an incredible feeling. To know that you had something to do with it, A, and B, to know it can be done. To know that you can plant something in the world and it'll grow and change the world ever so slightly.
Whether Next can be a viable business is something only time will tell. But Steve Jobs' passionate commitment to his vision is clear. and his certainty that it can be achieved and is worth achieving is a conviction to be observed in all successful entrepreneurs.
People want to be more like you.
Really?
So, and for the fate of humankind, I think it would be great to have more Elon Musks. So what do we need to do to become more like Elon?
I don't know if it's, I think it maybe sounds better than it is. Honestly, like there's a friend of mine who's got a great saying about creating a company, which is trying to build a company and have it succeed is like eating glass and staring into the abyss. So, I mean, what tends to happen is it's sort of quite exciting for the first several months of starting a company, and then reality sets in. Things don't go as well as planned. Customers aren't signing up. The technology or the product isn't working as well as you thought. And then that can sometimes be compounded by a recession, and it can be very, very painful for several years. So I think, frankly, starting a company, I would advise people to have a high pain tolerance.
Yeah. And thanks for reminding us of the harsh, very harsh and brutal reality of launching a startup. There is that Elon Musk / Tony Stark mystique. People think, you are Robert Downey Jr. modeled his character, Tony Stark, Iron Man, on you. It's easy, it's fun. You're a superhero titan of industry, but it's really hard. It's really difficult, and it's something that requires perseverance and grit. Do you fear that maybe in this generation or the younger generation that they don't have that perseverance and grit to take on these really tough challenges?
I think some people do.
Yeah.
But no, I think it is definitely true that, I mean, maybe there are occasionally companies that get created where there's not an extended period of extreme pain. But I'm not aware of very many of such instances. But I do think that new great entrepreneurs are born every day, and we'll continue to see amazing companies get built. But I would definitely advise people who are starting a company to expect a long period of quite high difficulty. But I mean, as long as people stay super focused on creating an absolute best product or service that really delights their end customer, like if they stay focused on that, then if you get it such that your customers want you to succeed, then you probably will.
Right. You have to focus on the customer and delivering for them.
Yeah, make sure if your customers love you, your odds of success are dramatically higher.
All the entrepreneurs in this room, they're listening to that message, and we're running out of time, so this is the final question. This is for the budding entrepreneurs in the room who could take an Elon Musk idea and run with it. I mean, quite famously, Hyperloop was the idea that you had to give away because you just don't have enough time to deal with it. What are the other ideas that you have that you would love to see another entrepreneur just take on and go?
Well, I think there's a lot of opportunity in general in electrification of transport. So electric aircraft, I think there's a lot of opportunity there. I think in genetics, although that's sort of a thorny area, but I think that's in terms of solving some of the more intransigent diseases. Genetics are really key to solving those. Something that I think people maybe are only beginning to look at is establishing some kind of brain-computer interface.
A brain-computer interface.
Yeah, at the neuron level. So this is sort of intelligence augmentation as opposed to artificial intelligence. And I think that has a lot of potential.
You mentioned this to me yesterday. I really had kind of no idea what you were talking about, and then I looked up Ian Banks, neural lace.
Neural lace.
That's right.
Exactly.
And so it's this concept of, wiring the brain. So it's either there could be a brain internet. And it could also mean that we can upload our thoughts to the cloud.
You would never forget anything. And you wouldn't need to take photographs.
Yeah. I know, it's incredible. I mean, you would never forget anything. You would expand your ability to process information, to remember information, right? But then when the denial of service attack happens,
you gotta watch out for hacking. That could really be awkward.
watch out for that. But also, then I read it can also be used to fight degenerative diseases like Parkinson's too.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think it actually would be quite an equalizer as well, because I think the delta between it would sort of even things out. I think.
You mean in humankind?
Yeah,
There would be no education disadvantage. Everyone would be starting at the same level.
Yeah.
So there would be no meritocracy. No, there would be meritocracy.
There would be, but it would be the differences would be smaller. The delta would be smaller, probably.
Wow, and you really welcome that kind of world.
I don't welcome. You asked for predictions.
Okay.
Predictions are not the same as preferences. So, I mean, do I think something like that is likely to occur? I think probably.
Wow. Wow, it's incredible. We could go on and on. Unfortunately, we have to wrap and leave it at that. Let's give it up for Elon Musk. That was really awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
If you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. You focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. For example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. And I think that's the way to go. For any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. Depending on how well you want to do, particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we're so hot up we had one computer, so the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. And I sort of briefly had a girlfriend in that period, and in order to be with me, she had to sleep in the office. So work hard, like, every waking hour. That's the thing I would say, particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company. Really liking what you do, whatever area that you get into. Given that, even if you're the best, there's always a chance of failure. So I think it's important that you really like whatever you're doing. If you don't like it, life is too short. If you like what you're doing, you think about it even when you're not working. I mean, it's something that your mind is drawn to. And if you don't like it, you just really can't make it work, I think. We're doing these things that seem unlikely to succeed, and we've been fortunate in the
at least thus far, they have succeeded.
I think the first is, depending upon how well you want to do, and particularly if you're starting a company, you need to work super hard. So what does super hard mean? Well, when my brother and I were starting our first company, instead of getting an apartment, we just rented a small office and we slept on the couch. And we showered at the YMCA, and we had just one computer. So the website was up during the day, and I was coding at night. 7 days a week, all the time. Work hard like every waking hour. That's the thing I would say particularly if you're starting a company. And I mean, if you do simple math, say like, okay, if somebody else is working 50 hours and you're working 100, you'll get twice as much done in the course of a year as the other company.
I think too is you got to make sure that whatever you're doing is a great product or service. It has to be really great. And I go back to what I was saying earlier, where if you're a new company, I mean, unless it's like some new industry or new market that, if it's an untapped market, then you have more ability to, the standard is lower for your product or service. But if you're entering anything where there's an existing marketplace against large entrenched competitors, then your product or service needs to be much better than theirs. It can't be a little bit better, because then you put yourself in the shoes of the consumer and they say, why would you buy it as a consumer? You're always going to buy the trusted brand unless there's a big difference. So a lot of times an entrepreneur will come up with something which is only slightly better. And it can't just be slightly better, it's got to be a lot better.
The other thing I'd say is that if you're creating a company or if you're joining a company, the most important thing is to attract great people. So either join a group that's amazing, that you really respect, or if you're building a company, you've got to gather great people. I mean, all a company is a group of people that have gathered together to create a product or service. And so depending upon how talented and hardworking that group is, and the degree to which they are focused cohesively in a good direction, that will determine the success of the company. So do everything you can to gather great people if you're creating a company. Then I'd say focus on signal over noise. A lot of companies get confused. They spend money on things that don't actually make the product better. So, for example, at Tesla, we've never spent any money on advertising. We put all of the money into R&D and manufacturing and design to try to make the car as good as possible. And I think that's the way to go. So for any given company, just keep thinking about, are these efforts that people are expending, are they resulting in a better product or service? And if they're not, stop those efforts. And then I think that the final thing I would encourage you to do is, now is the time to take risk. You don't have, you don't have kids, but as you get older, your obligations increase. And once you have a family, you start taking risk not just for yourself, but for your family as well. It gets much harder to do things that might not work out. So now is the time to do that before you have those obligations. So I would encourage you to take risks now. Do something bold. You won't regret it.